千里之行，始于足下. A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Tao to travel the journey together. Welcome to Tao Talks with Derek Lin, where we delve deeply into the Daodejing by Lao Zi. Last time we began our discussion, as usual, we started with section analysis. Chapter 48 has a central focus on Wu Wei. We started with that, and we're going to end with Wu Wei. And so here's what the chapter looks like. It's a chapter, as you can see, that contains 8 lines. It does have a rather unconventional structure. That is, 2 lines in the first section, followed by 2 sections of 3 lines each, as you can see. And the lines, the dividing lines, divide up the characters where you can see definite repeating characters from one line to the next, denoting that that's where the sections are. So we got to line 3, loss and more loss. Let's pick it up there, and let's also talk about, briefly recap our discussion on lines 1, 2, and 3. These are 3 very important lines, and then we're going to get to later on today, the most important line in this chapter. So here's a quick recap on what's happened so far. So we initially started out talking about the first line, which says, pursue knowledge, daily gain. We talked about how this seemed like a very positive statement because people are still kind of stuck at the level of knowledge is power. Tao cultivators, on the other hand, realize that the process of gaining knowledge is really just the beginning. It's at the lowest level, the beginning stage of the spiritual quest. And last time, you may recall that I illustrated this whole idea with the following graphic. So you can see on the screen, I use a staircase here to depict the different levels of Tao cultivation, where you go ever higher as you climb this path. Knowledge is just the beginning and therefore is at the bottom. And we talked about why knowledge is actually limited and how to be aware of those limitations. We talked about the distortion of the trap of knowledge. We talk about how knowing more leads to getting more, and oftentimes it is at the dictates or at the expectation of other people rather than what you actually need for your spiritual quest. So continue on. We also talked about the second line, which is about pursuing Tao, daily laws. So the automatic assumption may be that this is at a higher level than the pursuit of knowledge, which it is, and then this will be the highest level, which it is not. This is the second level. It's a level higher than knowledge. This is just recognizing that when you pursue the Tao, it's a different thing with a very different feel than the accumulation of knowledge. With the accumulation of knowledge is its addition, its gain, its increase. Whereas when you are turning your attention to the Tao instead, it's about losing more and more of the burden, unlearning that which doesn't serve you, moving on with a lighter baggage, and eventually no baggage at all. So initially, loss the idea of loss may seem like a negative thing, but then you realize how much burden, all the unnecessary stuff we carry with us, but can really do without in life. That realization brings upon the question, why wouldn't we want to lose them? Of course, loss is a good thing. And that's depicted in the next level, continuing with the same stairway motif. You can see that the level above learning is the level of the Tao. It's all about subtraction, not addition. You lose your attachments one by one. You get beyond the idea, the expectation from other people, from society perhaps, that you need to get more, you need to climb higher and higher. You may still end up getting more and climb higher, but that's only because it fits with your own plan for yourself, not without what other people have planned for you. So this is the second level that we covered last time. Then, continuing with the recap, we got to line 3. Line 3, loss and more loss. This is talking about the continuous process of refinement. When cultivating the Tao is just the beginning, continuous cultivation is what follows. And this has a bunch of implications. In this particular slide, we talk about the physical environments being free of clutter. That's very handy, very helpful. In terms of doing your work, it means getting more away from the jack of all trades, master of none concept, and becoming excellent at what you do. Your special skill, the thing that incorporates most of yourself, what you're known for. And in terms of personal connections with other people, interactions with others, this is talking about quality over quantity. Good, deep friendship with a few trusted friends, and not shallow acquaintance with many people. So in the Tao, it's all about depth. It's all about letting time prove out the value of your friendship. So this brings us to the end of our discussion last time, approximately. This is the quick recap for that. And now we want to continue on our discussion, starting from line 4. Line 4 says, until one reaches unattached action. Let's talk about that. So I have highlighted line 4 here. And in continuation from our topic, our theme last time, all about refinement. And refinement is simplification, streamlining. It means letting go of the things you don't need. It means distilling to the pure essence. You continue until you get to the point of pure essence, where the wisdom is at its most powerful. Now, there's a quote that this really reminds me of this quote, and I thought that it was Einstein. Supposedly, Einstein was quoted as having said, everything should be as simple as it can be, but not simpler. So this makes sense from the scientific physicist perspective, which Einstein had. He wanted this elegant equation. He wanted to simplify. He wanted to boil all that knowledge in physics, cosmology, etc., down to the bare essentials. But then there's a point where you get to the essence. You can't go beyond that because it cannot be any simpler than that. E is equal to mc squared, meaning that's one of the simplest, most refined, and most powerful equations known to man. And yet, it cannot be simpler than that. You've reached the level of pure essence. So later on, upon investigating this particular quote, I see that there's no definite proof that he actually said it. It might have been something that he said. He was cited by other people as having expressed the notion very much like it. But the idea is good. The idea is about boiling down to the purest, most powerful essence. When you cannot refine, simplify, or streamline any further without losing that essence. That's what it is in the Tao. That expresses the idea very well that Lao Tzu was trying to express. And here's the bottom line. When all your thoughts, words, and actions are at this level, the level of the pure essence, pure wisdom, that is when you have attained mastery, total mastery, complete mastery of the states that we call Wu Wei. That's a very powerful state, and there's a lot that I want to say about Wu Wei today. Not just what it is, but also how to get more of it, how to attain it. What is the pathway to get to this powerful mental state called Wu Wei? For now, though, when we talk about loss and more loss, until one reaches unattached action, this is actually yet another level above what we have talked about so far. So we started out talking about pursuing knowledge, daily gain. We follow that up with pursuing Tao, daily loss. Now we have loss and more loss, that just picking up where we left off. So in the graphic, we will represent it like so. With loss and more loss until one reaches unattached action, and yet another level above where we were just at when we talked about how the Tao is all about reducing. So there's a couple of considerations here that I want to point out. So first of all, this is a lifelong, never-ending process. And the reason why it's never-ending, you can attain mastery of this reducing, losing, decreasing process, but then because life is what it is, something new always pops up. You have to incorporate it, you have to reduce it, you have to streamline it, you have to simplify. And that's why it's always going to be there. The process is always going to be present. The other consideration is the following. As you get closer to Wu Wei, this powerful state, you realize that you can never truly own anything. So remember, when we talk about daily loss, and then we talk about loss and more loss, a lot of it has to do with attachments. Attachments to things, the material world, the praise, the reputation, fame and fortune. And ownership and possession figure prominently when we talk about material possessions. The key realization, which I'm going to reiterate a few more times, is that one can never truly own anything. At best, you are but a temporary steward. And other ways to talk about that is that for the things you own, whatever that is, whether it's a house or a vehicle or whatever else, you are just a temporary steward. Sometimes we say you're just a custodian, you're taking care of this possession before you have to hand it over to someone else, or hand it over perhaps to the next generation. Another way to talk about that is that you are the temporary caretaker of that possession. So the steward, the custodian, the caretaker, these are not, we know that these are not the owner in the permanent sense. These are just, a temporary person who takes possession for a while in order to look after it, so that hopefully by the time you are done handing it off to the next person, it's going to be well taken care of. It's going to be maybe better than it was before, cleaner, more organized perhaps. But let me point out one thing. Whether we're talking about steward, custodian, or caretaker, these are all terms that apply to things that last longer than you do. Maybe a house, maybe when we talk about real estate properties, maybe a piece of land, These are things that outlast you, and therefore you serve as steward, custodian, or caretaker for that. You're going to own, quote unquote, own, or quote unquote, possess plenty of things that do not last longer than you do. You get them for a while, they break down, they eventually get thrown away. You perhaps have no choice but to discard them. And therefore, you're not really the custodian, caretaker, or steward for those items. You are, though, for the things that last longer than you do. But either way, whether you serve as the temporary steward or not, you don't really own it. You don't really own anything. So that's the realization that makes it easy for you to let go of your attachments. So let's continue on. You can sort of tell in this particular graphic that there's yet another level above this one, and you can maybe read a little bit of the text, but let's focus on it to gain clarity. So line 5 says, with unattached action, there is nothing one cannot do. And in the original, in Mandarin, this is 无为而无不为. So this is a central concept for this particular chapter. Specifically, 无为, which is the first two characters, key concept in the Tao in general. And this is often mistranslated as non-action, inaction, or doing nothing. And the reason is because of the two characters. Wu, the first character, means to be without, to not have. Wei is the part that's translated as action. In reality, though, Wu Wei, the second part, isn't action. It is more like intention, agenda, a selfish purpose. So to proceed without that agenda or selfish purpose is to move in a way, to act in a way that is free of attachments. That's the real meaning. So I want everyone to get this part specifically because it is so often misunderstood by just about everyone. So Wu Wei, remember, it isn't doing nothing. It's unattached action. It's important to note that when you work, when you interact with other people, and you practice unattached action, you can occasionally get to a point where, according to your observations, you don't actually need to do anything. So minimal action can transition for that particular case into non-action or doing nothing. If so, then doing nothing is a subset of the meaning of Wu Wei. It's not the whole thing. Now, let me also cover the second part of it, the final part of it, Wu Bu Wei, the last three characters. Wu Bu Wei is a double negative. Why is that? Well, the first character is the same. It is still doing without, being without, or lacking something. Wu Bu, the second character there, is a negative. It means no, or not, or none. And then the last character there is in the context of action, intention, or intention leading to action. So when you just talk about the last two characters, 不为, that means you don't, that literally does mean that you don't do anything, that you don't accomplish anything, you're not able to achieve anything. But then when you put another negative in front of that, 无不为, that's a double negative, and it means that there's nothing you cannot do. And when we say there's nothing you cannot do, that too is a double negative expressed in English. And we know that when we say in English, there's nothing you cannot do, it means you can do anything. You can do whatever you set your mind to do. So when we talk about wu wei or wu bu wei, when we put it together, what we're saying is that if you are able to act without attachments like, selfish motives, things of that nature, then you can do anything. You become a more powerful person, more authentically powerful person. And the last thing to note is that it goes beyond the ability to be able to get something done. When we talk about wu wei or wu bu wei, we're also talking about excellent results. That is, this is a state of mind, state of being, where you are not only able to do things, but you're able to do them extremely well. So here I say, consistently able to do the most with the least. The most results, the best results with the least effort, with the most economical, most efficient set of actions. So this is how a lot of times when you see this in action, it would be that the master seems to not do very much, seems to do very little, perhaps just a nudge, and something dramatic happens as a result of that. It's like identifying a pressure point, putting pressure on that, and achieving a massive result. So least effort for the best results. A lot of times we like to use an expression like, well, how do I get the most bang for the bucks? So we have actually the same idea embedded in Western culture. We would also like to have that level of efficiency leading to the greatest, to the best quality. So there's a lot, this is an important concept. There's a lot more to be said about that. So the one thing to note, this is a little beyond my previous remark about how wu wei does not mean do nothing. Overall, wu wei or wu bu wei, this does not mean do nothing and do everything. And this is important to note because I know that there are translations out there that talk about the meaning of this line and translate it as exactly that, and that's a wrong translation. Do nothing and do everything. If taken literally, that doesn't really make any sense. But if you think about the correct interpretation about most efficient action, which sometimes is no action, just letting things be, letting things progress to the natural flow, then yeah, it makes more sense. It makes a lot of sense that you can attain great results, excellent results. So doing nothing, as I mentioned, is just a subset of that. It's not the whole meaning. So when Lao Tzu wrote this line, wu wei or wu bu wei, I know that there's a tendency, there's an inclination from some students of the Tao to assume that Lao Tzu must be writing with a paradox in mind, that they assume this must be intentionally contradictory to itself. And I'm here to tell everyone that's actually not the case. Whenever in the past I have looked into cases where there are supposedly paradox or puzzles or enigma in the Tao, invariably I find that it was just misunderstanding of something that was supposed to be crystal clear. In this case, that is also true. Lao Tzu is actually trying to be as clear as he could be in expressing this idea that there's a way to get fantastic results. You just have to do it while focusing on the process and not the end result. That's one of the things, that's one of the shades of meaning that he expresses. He's talking about a natural state of excellence. He's talking about how, look at the Tao. The Tao achieves everything while not trying to achieve anything. So we can all be better at what we do when we emulate that. So the overall idea, keep in mind, act without attachments to a particular outcome. When your focus is on the action, not the end result, suddenly everything falls into place. So as I mentioned, masters, Tao sages can oftentimes, when they master this craft, when they master this whole concept of Wu Wei, they can resolve complex problems with a simple solution. We, you and I, can learn to do the same thing. Masters and sages often answer tough questions with a simple answer. They can use just a few words to resolve something that proves to be puzzling to a whole bunch of other people. Same idea, same mindset, same method, which is exactly what we're going to get into today. And as you can see, this is powerful and also very practical and useful. So let's focus on Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei. And here I say when you leverage the magic of Wu Wei, and that is because I definitely feel that there's magic in it. It creates results that seem magical. But then I have to amend that to someone who is proficient with the Tao, to someone who is familiar with the Tao. It isn't really magical. There's nothing supernatural about it. It's actually the most natural thing imaginable. It's the most ordinary thing, which if you look around in our world, the most ordinary things that are happening all the time are also the most extraordinary. If there is a paradox in the Tao, well, perhaps there it is. Not in the statements of Lao Tzu, but in what we see all around us, the ordinary miracles of life. Now, you may have felt Wu Wei before. Let me bring up some descriptions and let me ask you to reflect upon your life if it's something that you have experienced for yourself. So another way, a contemporary way to talk about Wu Wei, psychologists will call it the flow state, to be in the zone. So this is what I meant when I said you may have felt this before. You may remember that this was a peak experience in your life. What do I mean by that? Take a look at these bullets. When you were in the flow state or in the zone, it was a time when you felt fully immersed. You were totally involved, totally engaged. You and the activity were one and the same. You felt energized as you focused on the objective. And when I say the objective, it can be a little misleading. When I say the objective, it means the moves. It means the motion. It means the process. The objective is to, quote unquote, make the perfect move. So have you experienced something like that before? If so, please feel free to type it out. Number two, when we talk about the perfect move, there are some elements to that I want to single out and focus on. the timing of the movements seem perfect. If it's an artistic expression, maybe music, maybe painting, maybe drawing, the expression seems perfect. So as your movements, timing, and expression of yourself, of your artistic nature approach perfection, you realize that you were completely concentrating during that process, but there wasn't any straining, there wasn't any struggles. It was just smooth and easy and yet totally focused. You lose the sense of self. It's only you melding into the activity, and the world seems to fade away. Time stands still, or a lot of time has passed, but you were so involved in the timeless process that you did not realize so much time has passed. And again, this may be a peak experience that you've had in the past. Lastly, there's one more aspect of it that deserves to be described by itself. There's an experience of this universal energy, this creativity, like a river of energy that's flowing through you. Hard to describe, but everything just seems to come together, and it comes together just right. They fall into place as if choreographed or preordained. I would even say divinely choreographed. And there's pure bliss in the moment, pure enjoyment of the process. Sometimes it is so timeless and you lose yourself, you lose the sense of the self so much that you may not even realize that you are in a deep state of bliss until after the experience is over. So this is an experience that people seek out actively. Usually, they try to do that with extreme sports. And here I just have mountaineering as sort of a quick stand-in for that. The reason why people get into extreme sports is because the high speed or element of danger that is often present in extreme sports, that can force your mind into focus. That can give you no choice but to go into the flow state or in the zone when you are fully immersed in the activity and you are focused. There's total concentration but no strain. So think about something like that. Think about this mountaineer that you see in the graphic, and think about how he is enjoying himself as he is engaged in this activity. He is one with the act of climbing this mountain. He feels one with his surroundings, with the mountain itself, with the movements. So there's complete involvement, complete engagement. Now, let me also say, you don't need to get into extreme sports to experience wu wei or wu bu wei. This is just a simple way to talk about it. This is just a way to describe what the experience feels like. Here's the important thing. You can feel all three of these in daily activity without putting yourself in danger, without going really fast, without being in extreme sports. You can be in the flow state playing music. And I see that some of you already have. And I can see that this experience is now foreign to you. And when you are engaged in the physical movement, let's just say Qigong or Tai Chi, you can work yourself into the flow state without necessarily putting yourself in a dangerous situation. It can be studying something. It can be engaging in some work. So all of these are part of the flow state. So we're about to get even more specific on that as far as how to get into it. For now, though, we owe it to ourselves to put this level, wu wei or wu bu wei, at the very top of the stairway that we've been looking at all this time. So let me bring you back to the graphic, and let me point out that now we have the topmost level, 无为而无不为, which means without attached action, there's nothing one cannot do. So this is it. In the levels of Tao cultivation, this is how you get to the very top of it, the level of Wu Wei. And this is why I say that it is so incredibly important. Couple of considerations. What happens when you reach this level? The impossible becomes possible, or what you thought of as impossible, it is now possible because what used to be out of reach is suddenly within grasp. So you can do things that other people consider difficult, it will come easily. And the other consideration, when you are in that state, when you are in Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei, everything just flows naturally, beautifully. There's no need for you to interfere with anything or anyone. Why even bother with interference when everything is coming together so beautifully? So this is just a couple of quick ways to describe the highest level, Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei. And this is only at the first half of this particular chapter. This is lines 1 to 5. So 5 lines out of 8 lines to get us from the bottom level, knowledge, all the way to the top level, which is unattached actions. So then we have 3 additional lines to get into. They are also extremely important and significant. And I can see from the feedback that everything that we're talking about here is very congruent with your life experience. So for those who have not experienced this a lot, let me say that when you are able to get to Wu Wei, this is when people will use expressions like amazing, incredible, unbelievable. To someone that can do it consistently, they may describe that person as a miracle worker. And remember, to the miracle worker himself or herself, to the person that's actually in the state and doing whatever that is, there's no fanfare. There's nothing showy. It's just in the mind of the person who's engaged in the Wu Wei activity, there's just a sort of a calm certainty as you make one move after another, and all of those moves come out perfectly. Now let's also explore the last 3 lines. There is a huge amount to talk about there as well. In just 5 lines, look at what we have done. We have talked about the 4 levels of the Tao. Now, let's explore lines 6, 7, and 8. Line 6 says, take the world by constantly applying non-interference. So this is a line that we can analyze by first focusing on the 3 characters, the first 3 characters. So the first 3 characters, 取天下, literally translate as take the world, but it doesn't mean just what the characters suggest. There are multiple layers of meaning embedded within the 3 characters. One thing that I want to point out, this is a key expression that appears here in the beginning of line 6 and also at the very end of this chapter. So you can identify the 3 characters in red, but also you can notice that the same 3 characters appear as the last 3 characters of the entire chapter. So that's one way to tell that this is a key expression. And I mentioned that 取天下, take the world, applies in different ways at different levels. Let's explore that. Let's talk about the different levels. There's a level where it applies to the ruler. This is where you hear about the Daodejing being advised to the ruler. At that level, 取天下, to take the world, means to master the kingdom or to unify the empire. So the ruler can be the king or the emperor. Of course, you and I are not actual emperors or kings or queens, but we rule our own personal empire in the life that we manage. So that's the other layer of meaning. Let's be more specific about that. For the Tao cultivator, this is the meaning. And it too contains multiple layers when it applies to you personally. It's about fulfilling your potential. When I talk about fulfilling your potential, what I mean is becoming the best at what you do. When you are at your best, the best version of yourself, you have taken the world, meaning you have unified your personal empire, you have mastered your personal kingdom, the kingdom that is your life. And so it's all about living up to the incredible potential that you already possess. The other context is living the best possible life for yourself. Walking the path of the Tao means to master the art of living to such an extent that your life becomes an example of living in the Tao for other people. The best possible life is the life that is wu wei or wu bu wei, that is unattached actions leading to phenomenal results. Best possible life is graceful, smooth, easy, flowing, and yet everything about it works out perfectly. So that's how this applies. 取天下, therefore, is something that we should aspire to. So the other part of it that I want to focus on comes from the very end of this particular line. It says 无事. So 无事, two characters. The first one is to not have. The second one would be things to do, affairs to manage. So let's talk about these two characters and what they mean. So the pinyin 无事, literally 无, to be without, to not have, 事, things to engage in, involvement, things to process, affairs to manage. When you put them together, the meaning is without getting involved, without excessive interference. So right off the bat, what we're looking at here is that 取天下, take the world. If you want to do that, you have to do it through non-excessive interference. You have to not interfere. So that's actually quite profound. There's a lot to be said about that. One thing that we know it doesn't say is that Lao Zi is not trying to say that if you want to take the world, you should not do anything. Okay, that will be the same misunderstanding that people have on Wu Wei. So I'll talk about exactly what that means. First of all, I want to talk about how Wu Shi, the last two characters, is the opposite of 有事 in the next line. So this is a bit of a preview for the next line. 有事 in line 7 is something that we're going to talk about in detail momentarily. It's translated as the one who interferes. So without interference versus the one who interferes. Okay, so I'll get there in just a moment. Now, what we want to do is to complete our discussion of line 6. Okay, what we have here is constantly applying non-interference. So adding two characters in front of it to bring in the context of being constant, being consistent. So this is basically saying that the practice of non-interference has to be something that's always on, that's always there. So I want to talk about why that is for just a moment. What happens when you interfere with other people? This is what happens. When you intrude or try to force your will on others, you're sending a signal that you don't trust them. Like, I don't trust you to do a good job on this, and therefore I have to micromanage you. I have to control everything because, well, frankly, I don't trust you. So this lack of trust is crucial in personal relationships because it's like a mirror. When you break that trust, when you show that the trust is in fact already broken, the bad news is that it can never be mended perfectly. You can't put it back together. This is why you have to always adhere to this principle. So now we have talked about the components of line 6. We've talked about 取天下, take the world, what that means to the ruler, what that means to the person. And now we have also talked about the way to do that is by constantly applying non-interference. Let's wrap up line 6 by bringing the different elements together for the totality of the meaning. Take the world by constantly applying non-interference. So let's talk about what this means for the ruler and how this can be applied to the individual. So the overall question is, how would we apply this idea of non-interference, which is the last two characters, 无事? From the perspective of the ruler, the king or the emperor, it's the Tao of leadership. What is the Tao of leadership? Well, it's actually a recurring topic in the Daodejing. It's not often recognized as such, but let me point out that in a previous chapter, chapter 17, Lao Tzu talked about this very topic, the Tao of leadership. He had a line in there. He starts chapter 17 with 太上不知有之. So what does that mean? It's translated as the highest rulers, people do not know they have them. So this translation, the original meaning, has been puzzling to many. Like, people don't understand. How is it that we don't know that we have rulers? That seems impossible. Well, this is describing a notion of leadership that is unlike the conventional notion, and therefore it is not that easy to understand. Let us together work our way to greater understanding of it because it applies exactly to take the world by constantly applying non-interference. So let's talk about the difference between the Tao concept of leadership and the conventional concept of leadership. So think about leadership in our world. Think about what we typically see in life. Conventional leadership is about directing, commanding, giving orders. Now, when you have someone in that role, directing, commanding, giving orders, you have seen from experience that this can easily become micromanagement, backseat driving, which is interference. So the non-interference approach of the Tao would not be this kind of interference, So just taking the conventional leadership in the workplace as an example, no-interference approach would be, rather than to interfere with everyone, trying to control everything, the no-interference approach of the Tao would be that you put the right people doing the right job in the right place, you give them all the resources they need, and you get out of the way. You can accomplish great results. You can attain phenomenal results this way, and yet it is free of the controlling micromanagement interference of what we typically see. So yeah, this kind of leadership is not usual. It is not frequently seen at all. Occasionally, we do see people who have the wisdom of putting the right people in the right place, people with the right talents, doing the right job, give them all the support they need, and let them just show their stuff. So that's one way to talk about it. And this is a pretty good feel for leadership in the Tao context. It does apply in all kinds of different leadership scenarios. And I would even say we don't have to limit ourselves to the workplace. We can talk about other aspects of life, like the family, like parenting, because elements of leadership is also present in parenting as well. And there are times when we see the interfering type of leadership or parenting in a family, and that often involves parents wanting to force their kids into doing something that is clearly unsuited to them. And when I talk about this, I think about a friend of mine who is an amazing graphics designer. She comes up with these beautiful, elegant designs. So I remember one day I complimented her on her incredible talents. And I told her, it's such a natural skill that you have. So I think you must have started at a young age. Am I right? Now, it was surprising to me, but this actually caused a pretty strong reaction in my friend. A lot stronger of a reaction than I expected, because she said, well, my life could have gone in a completely different direction. I said, well, what do you mean? What do you mean by that, a completely different direction? She said that she explained. She seemed very emotionally agitated when I brought this up, but she calmed down, and then she said that when she was little, her mother forced her to learn the piano. Her mother wanted her to become a musician. She said, it really was just her living vicariously through me, because, her aspiration always was to become an accomplished pianist. But then life happened. She got married. Life became very messy, very busy. She could no longer pursue her passion. So the way that she dealt with it, the way that she dealt with this particular problem in her life, was to put it all on her child, her daughter, my friend. So she wanted me to do it, is what she said, and she described it as forcing a square peg into a round hole. She was always interested in art, not music. Her mother was kind of like a tiger mom. She insisted that her daughter, her child, practice the piano for hours in a day. And she was completely disinterested. She just wanted to get back to her drawing. And this caused a lot of friction in her family. This caused a lot of battles that she resisted. Even as a young child, she resisted. She didn't want to do it. She wanted to do what she loved. And what my friend told me was that because she was so little, this was a traumatic experience she remembers to this day. Now, eventually, after a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, she did prevail. My friend prevailed and was able to pursue her passion, and she excelled at it, exactly like I said. But this was just an example to me of someone forcing his will or her will to another person, contrary to that person's nature. And this will be interference. This would be something that produces negative results. So it doesn't have to be the workplace. It could be in the home. It could be in the family, and it can apply to many other contexts as well. But that was just my quick example to demonstrate that it can apply universally for all human beings. So to continue on this particular track, let me talk about the Tao of leadership more explicitly. The question that I posed to everyone a few slides ago was, well, how can it be that when people had the highest level of leadership, that they may not even realize that they had a leader? So this is where I address that. They may not realize that they had the blessing of Tao leadership, just like it's kind of similar to how when you are so immersed in an activity and you are in the flow state, you are experiencing this Wu Wei state, you don't even realize that it's a blissful experience until after the fact, until after you're done. And you reflect on the experience and, yeah, I was having a great time. But I had so completely lost my sense of self, I was not aware of it at the time. So at the highest level of the Tao, a leader in the Tao tradition, in the Tao context, in the Tao concept, would act as an agent of change, a catalyst for positive transformation. When you act as, in this role, agent of change, a catalyst, you may not act like a conventional leader. And where you are leading people to, where you are guiding people, is what is the most natural and beneficial. Because the accomplishment at the end of that process seems so natural, it seems exactly like what people want, the people who are experiencing this kind of leadership may assume that they did it all by themselves because it's what they wanted to do all along. So the person behind the scenes who encouraged them, who pushed them, nudged them in the right direction, may simply, satisfied that the work is done, may simply disappear, may simply fade off, knowing that it's accomplished. The Tao has been accomplished. So this is not easy to see in the world because it is so rare, but let me bring you some comparisons between what is typical, what is mundane, what is conventional, versus what the Tao is when it comes to leadership. So what I have here is a table. There are different attributes related to leadership on the left-hand side. So that's the world of leadership, if you will. The typical leader, I use a crown, as you can see, to represent that. This is sort of the conventional signifier. This is the symbol of power in the typical material world setting. And then on the right, of course, I have the yin and yang symbol representing the Tao. So the middle column will be what the typical leader will do, will think about, is like, and then on the right is the Tao concept in comparison. So this will illustrate how they are quite different. And let's start out with position. In the typical leadership scenario, the typical leader would be topmost and foremost. It's quote unquote lonely at the top of the pyramid. So the typical leader would occupy the top position in a hierarchy, or would be in the forefront, most visible, leading the charge, so to speak. we're all very used to this kind of leadership because it is so high profile and so highly visible. The Tao concept is actually the opposite. The Tao concept is below and behind. What does that mean? It means a sage leader supports people, lifts them up. People do not feel the burden of leadership. They don't feel like the sage leader, the masterful leader, is pushing down on them from the top. Now, let's talk about communication. This is where it is most apparent, whether you have the typical leader or an extraordinary leader who understands the Tao. So in the mundane world, the mundane leader, orders people around and is also the one who lectures the team, the people that are in the team. And when the typical leader lectures, there's usually a lot of shoulds. You should do this, you should do that, you should do it this way, you should do it my way, a lot of shoulds. So what about the leader of the Tao, the leader in the Tao context? Such a leader listens to people. So the Tao leadership is one that listens more than ordering people around or lecturing them. Listening is the key to finding out what the team members are experiencing, what they're hoping they can accomplish, to understand them better, to find out about their concerns. And when the typical leader lectures the team, think about how this is a mindset that reflects upon the typical leader thinking that where would the team be without me? The team is dependent on me to tell them what to do and how to do it. The Tao leadership is different in wanting the team to be independent and self-sufficient. The sage leader would be careful to avoid creating some sort of dependency, wanting people to be at their best on their own, of their own initiative, to develop and grow them as individuals. Now, what about the third factor there? Support. By support, I am really talking about loyalty. How would the typical leader see the concept of loyalty, and how would the Tao leader see the same concept? The typical leader would demand support. This means demand loyalty. You must be loyal to me. You must give me loyalty first before I will do nice things for you. You can guess that the Tao concept is the opposite. The sage leader, the Tao leadership, provides support to the entire team. The Tao leader gives his or her loyalty to the team before anything else, and everything is for the team first. And the next one here, build. So this is the question of what would such a leader build, depending on the type. So for the typical leader, the mundane leader, the building is all about the power base, the base of his or her power. He is building to strengthen it and to expand the base of power. What about the Tao leader? Well, you can imagine it's going to be very different. The Tao leader isn't building the power base, but building community where people can freely interact, exchange their ideas, and support one another. So very different. Now, it so happens that when you follow the Tao of leadership, you get powerful side effects that the community you build was not meant to be your power base when you are following the Tao of leadership, and yet it becomes your most ardent supporters. It becomes the base for your fans. that was never the original intention. It was a community for the community, and yet it becomes even more enduring than anything that the typical leader can provide. So let's continue on. Focus, this is about the orientation. The typical leader, the focus is on being the authority. I am the authority. I make the decisions. You must come to me. You must get my okay. You must obtain my approval. Being the authority. The focus, the orientation of the Tao leader, not the same. Being of service. How can I serve? So here you can tell that the concept is not completely foreign to the Western mindset. In the West, there is a concept of leadership that is beginning to attract a lot of notice. It's called servant leadership. It's a different name for what Lao Tzu had in mind 2,500 years ago. The sage who's a leader would be the servant of the team, of the people, of the community that he serves. So it's all about service, not about authority, for the true leader of the Tao. And then one last one, easy to see, for the achievements of the team, whatever they are, the typical leader would be someone who wants to take credit for that. And this goes back to the first one. The typical leader is topmost and foremost, and therefore would demand that the achievements of the team are his achievements. Whereas the Tao leadership, rather than to take credit of the team's work, would give credit to the team, even for his own contributions, because the team comes first. So these are, I think, simple ways to see the difference between the Tao of leadership and contrasting that with the mundane kind of leadership. So you can also tell this is a good way to think about it, because one may just by reading the words of Lao Tzu, one may think that, well, so the lack of interference, to refrain from interference, does that mean you don't actually do anything as a leader? Well, what you can see here on the rightmost column under the Tao concept, you can tell that there's actually quite a bit that the Tao leader will do. And some of that can be thought of as interfering with this and that, in the context that, while there's no community in place, I'm going to start building a community. Am I interfering with the natural order of things? Perhaps, but it's what needs to be done. So non-interference is not a complete lack of interference, just like Wu Wei is not a complete lack of actions. So now let's continue on to line 7. Line 7 and line 8 are the opposites of line 6. So line 6 is talking about how you can, quote unquote, take the world, fulfill your potential, live the best life by constantly applying non-interference. Non-interference here being synonymous with the concept of Wu Wei. Number 7, line number 7 is about the one who interferes. So I want to highlight that by focusing on the last 2 characters, which I mentioned previously. The last 2 characters of line 6 and the last 2 characters of line 7 are opposites. So here in line 7, 有事, the pinyin spells Y-O-U, that's actually yo, Y-O-H, it sounds like. 有事. So this is not an expression that is used in the same way in modern Mandarin. Literally what it means in this context is to have involvement. 是, the second character, means things to manage, things to process. To have that, to be full of that. In this ancient context, these 2 characters are similar in feel to a modern Mandarin expression, 多管闲事. And what that means is a busybody who doesn't mind his own business, just loves to meddle in other people's stuff. Hey, what are you doing? Hey, why are you doing it that way? No, you should do it this way. That right there is 多管闲事, which is what we're talking about here. So what this is saying, line 7 and line 8, is that the one who does that, the busybody, is not going to be the one who succeeds, not going to be the one who takes the world. So let's complete this idea by looking at the last line. So 不足, the first two characters, means not sufficient. In this context, it means you don't have sufficient qualifications. You don't have enough qualifications. And the one who interferes definitely doesn't have the sufficient qualifications to win the world, to succeed. So here, I'm noting that those who interfere, the meddlesome busybodies with control issues, and what you might say, the control freak, will not succeed. And we can see why just by looking around in our world. Typically, as we go through life, we see the people who meddle in other people's business. We can tell they will not succeed for two reasons. Number one, quite naturally, people dislike that. You don't like it, I don't like, no one likes it. So people will naturally resist the meddling, or they avoid the meddler. Anytime someone has that reputation as the intrusive, interfering meddler, people will avoid that person as much as possible. So that's the first reason. People don't like it and people will resist it. The second reason is that when this meddler is so busy expending energy on what other people are doing and how they're doing it, it stands to reason, it's quite natural that this person will naturally neglect his own stuff. He's not minding his own business, so his business suffers. Therefore, the meddler fails. So these are definitely what happens over and over again. We see this in our world. We observe this all the time. Therefore, this is all coming together as a warning from Lao Tzu. The last part that you see here is a warning. And the warning is, we should all refrain from excessive interference. Now, Lao Tzu recognizes that there are roles that people take on, such as the role of a teacher, a coach, a parent, counselor, someone whose job it is to guide other people, is to provide mentorship. And when that is the case, you are obligated to interfere where you see fit to guide and nudge in the right direction. But that would not be excessive interference. So let's talk about success and the lack thereof and how it relates to this. In the Tao, we do talk about success, just not strictly in the monetary sense. In the Tao, success is about life success rather than monetary success. Monetary success can be part of life success. So one can succeed and be effortlessly excellent by following the Tao. The reverse is also true. In fact, the Tao is the way or the right path precisely because it is the path or the way to effortless excellence. So the reverse would be that you can fail in spectacular fashion by going against the Tao. So that's reflected in these three lines. If we proceed with Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei, to take unattached action, and therefore you can do anything, or this concept here of non-interference, then you can succeed in spectacular fashion. But if you go against the Tao, you can fail in spectacular fashion just the same. So take the world is the aspiration for all of us by following the Wu Wei principle of the Tao. That's the bottom line. That's the conclusion. This is toward the very end of our discussion to that, with a bunch of examples to follow. So we can see now, by this point, it's become very apparent that take the world for you and me, it just means taking charge of your own destiny, taking charge of your life. And my favorite expression is that this is to be your own sovereign. To be the sovereign, to be the ruler of your own life means all of the above. Taking charge of your world, your destiny, your life, all that you survey, all that you manage, you are in charge. Taking the reins of power, so to speak. So finally, the last three characters, 取天下, take the world. It's a worthy goal for all of us. This is so incredibly important, and it ties in with everything that we have talked about so far, that we should definitely focus on this line. In fact, the last two lines, the one who interferes is not qualified to take the world. So take a look at this slide. The one who interferes is not qualified to take the world. There's a whole bunch of implications to that. Now, this can be advice to the ruler. It can also be advice to the self. So in ancient China, the ruler was the king or the emperor. And for that person, for the ruler, 有事, meaning to interfere in this context, it can be done through a couple of different ways for the ruler. One, it can be to impose complex, burdensome laws, rules, and regulations to the people, making things more complicated and therefore more difficult. So that's one way to do it, is by interfering with people's lives through laws, regulations, the rules. Number two is that excessive taxation that enrich the treasury, the royal treasury, but starve the people. The people are suffering. The king may be doing well temporarily, but the people are not doing so well. Now you can see that the ruler who engages in the above loses the trust and goodwill of the people. Naturally, that's going to happen. So without the hearts and minds of the people, a ruler simply will not amount to anything. So I think that makes sense. So rather than to take the world, the ruler will lose the world. So this is how it applies to the king or the emperor. Now let's go ahead and apply it to us. So forget about taking the world. If you interfere, through taxation, through laws, you lose the world. So what about for us? At the personal level, this can be sage advice, wise advice for you and me. So here, 有事, interference, means to complicate your life through a couple of different ways. Number one, to interfere, to meddle with other people, trying to fix everybody's problems instead of your own. This actually maps to the burdensome laws and regulations, making everybody's lives more complicated. And then another way for the typical person or a cultivator of the Tao to complicate his or her own life is by trying to get more and more. And Yi, this character here, comes from the beginning part of the chapter where we talk about pursue knowledge, daily gain. This character means to gain or to benefit. it's to increase. So trying to get more and more rather than to simplify and streamline. And that's 损. That means lose or loss. So for the Tao cultivator, doing either one of these items will make life a lot more complicated. Now, those of you who have come into contact with Buddhist teachings, you may be aware that someone who becomes a monk in Buddhism is a person who renounces worldly belongings. You don't need to do that in the Tao, but you've got to understand how complexity can become an obstacle for you. When you don't have sufficient understanding, you can never take the world, just like the king or the emperor failing to master the kingdom or unite the empire. In this context, it means a failure to master your own life or your summary. So that is the contrast. That is how the different levels apply between non-interference for the king or emperor, as opposed to non-interference or not complicating your own life as a cultivator of the Tao. Having said that, truly, time flies. We are already running out of time, and we have to go to the summary for today. So how do we apply the Daodejing today? You saw the two additional levels on top of the two levels that we talked about before. And what we previously talked about, pursuing knowledge, daily gain, and pursue Tao daily loss, turn out to be just the beginning parts, the first half in the levels of Tao cultivation. We touched on loss and more loss, and we talked about it a little bit more today. This is the pathway to get to Wu Wei, that powerful state, the flow state, what we call unattached action. When you are there, there's nothing you cannot do. And this deserves a summary page all by itself. Wu Wei or Wu Bu Wei. With unattached action, there's nothing one cannot do. Let's focus in on that. I want to share with everyone in summary form the 4 steps to cultivate Wu Wei in your own life. As I mentioned, there's magic in Wu Wei, or what seems magical in Wu Wei. So how can we experience it more in daily life? How do we use Wu Wei to take the world, to 取天下, to live up to our potential, to live the best life possible? So in psychology, the 4 steps to cultivate Wu Wei are what is known as flow state triggers or optimal state triggers. What I want to do is I want to use this image here of the adorable little boy, so focused, so intent on drawing with crayons. I want to use this as a reminder for everyone that, hey, listen, you used to be really good at this. You used to be really good at Wu Wei or the flow states. You used to be completely focused, having a great time, lost in the process where time seems to stop or time seems to pass you by. So looking at this little boy, the idea is that this is not a new skill that you have to learn and develop. This is an old skill that you've had when you were little. It's something that you've always had. This is about rediscovering that old skill. Okay? So what are the 4 steps? 1, you must choose the right task. To cultivate Wu Wei, you want to pick something to do. This is when you become masterful at Wu Wei, you can apply Wu Wei to anything. When you're just starting out, you want to pick something that you love and something that challenges you. That's what I mean here by pushes the envelope. Something that is at the edge of your abilities to be able to accomplish. Something that means a lot to you and something that requires that you push the envelope. These are what's going to make it easy for you to concentrate and focus. That's number one. Number two, eliminate distractions. So this can be external and internal. With the external distractions, it's relatively easy. You just have to put away things that may draw your attention. For instance, there may be files that you don't really need on your desk. You may need to put your phone on mute. You may need to disable notifications. For some people, it is useful to go to a place where you won't be disturbed. And this is why many people flock to Starbucks or cafeterias, where they can focus on a particular task. Now, let me just say that when you do get distracted, it usually can cost you up to half an hour to get back into a focused, concentrated state. So it can be very costly. This leads me to the next point. Center yourself to focus on the task at hand. It typically takes about 15 minutes for the focus to transition into the flow state or the Wu Wei state. So you want to give yourself time. You want to focus on something that is meaningful, something that you love, that makes it easy to make the transition. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. That's number three. Number four, you want to continuously refine your skill at reaching the Wu Wei state. So the line from this chapter, 损之又损, loss and more loss, means continuously refine to eliminate what's not helpful, to continue doing what does help, and finally, keep the 10,000 hours rule. It's a rule of thumb. It's not exact. It means that when you practice anything for 10,000 hours, you become a master at it. So this is just a way to say that the process is finite. You will get there with your mastery of Wu Wei. When you do, it's going to be incredible. It's going to be miraculous, phenomenal, amazing. At least that's what other people will say. To you, as a proficient cultivator of the Tao, you would only see it as natural and ordinary. Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.